I'm currently sitting in a 24-hour diner, staring at a lukewarm cup of black coffee, wondering how a person can be deleted from their own life in less than 12 hours. My name is Julian. I'm 36, a forensic accountant, the kind of guy who finds money people try to hide. Ironically, I never noticed my wife was hiding my entire existence from me. Yesterday was my birthday. Maya, my wife of 8 years, had been planning a landmark event for weeks. She's a high-stakes corporate strategist, a woman who treats a Sunday brunch like a board meeting. I should have known that a surprise from her wasn't about a gift. It was about a takeover. The morning started with a strange glitch. I tried to log into our shared investment portal to check our portfolio. We were planning to buy a second home in Maine. Access denied, user not recognized. I figured it was a server error. Then my phone vibrated. A notification from our home security system. Guest access granted, front door. I was the only one home. Maya was supposedly at a spa. I checked the camera feed, but the screen was just static, a controlled, intentional static. When Maya came home, she didn't say happy birthday. She didn't even look at me. She just walked to the kitchen, poured a glass of wine, and handed me a thick manila envelope. "Julian, we need to discuss the restructuring of the household," she said. Her voice was clinical, no emotion, no "I found someone else," just business. I opened the envelope. Inside were copies of my own medical records, but they were wrong. They showed consultations I never attended, prescriptions for heavy sedatives I never took, and a psychologist's report suggesting I was suffering from severe cognitive dissociation and erratic behavior. "Maya, what is this? I've never seen this doctor in my life," I said, my heart starting to race. She finally looked at me and her eyes were like ice. "That's exactly what a person in your condition would say, Jules. The memory lapses have become problematic for the firm, for our reputation, and for our future." I reached for my phone to call my brother, but it wouldn't unlock. Face ID failed. My passcode had been changed. I realized then that while I was sleeping, she must have used my thumbprint or held the phone to my face to reconfigure everything. "I've already spoken to your partners at the firm," she continued, taking a casual sip of wine. "They've agreed to a quiet severance. Given your condition, they felt it was best to transfer your active cases to someone more stable, someone who hasn't been misplacing client funds." "Misplacing? I'm an auditor, Maya. I don't misplace anything," I yelled. "The digital trail says otherwise," she replied calmly. "And so does Mark." The name hit me like a physical blow. Mark was our neighbor, a guy I'd shared beers with at every neighborhood BBQ, a guy who worked in digital security. The front door opened. Mark didn't knock. He walked in with a set of keys, my keys, and set them on the counter. He was wearing the jacket I thought I'd lost at the dry cleaners a month ago. "Hey, Julian," Mark said. No malice, just a terrifyingly polite tone. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. The transport is already outside. We're going to get you the help Maya says you need." "Transport? What help?" I backed away, looking for a way out. "The wellness retreat in the Catskills," Maya said. "I've signed the voluntary admission papers on your behalf as your power of attorney. Remember? You signed those updates last month along with the tax documents." I felt a wave of nausea. She hadn't been cheating in the way most wives do. She hadn't been looking for a fling. She had been auditing my life, finding the vulnerabilities, and preparing to liquidate me. "You're not just leaving me," I whispered. "You're erasing me." "I'm optimizing, Julian," she corrected, "and it's my birthday gift to myself. A life without the baggage of a man who doesn't realize he's already lost." The transport Maya mentioned wasn't an ambulance. It was 2 men in suits who looked like they moonlighted as bounty hunters. They stood in my foyer, blocking the exit to the life I'd spent 15 years building. "Julian, please," Maya said, gesturing to the men. "If you resist, it only confirms the diagnosis in the report. Aggressive outbursts are a primary symptom of your breakdown. Just go quietly, for the sake of the neighbors." The neighbors. That was the kicker. I looked out the window and saw a crowd. It wasn't a mob. It was a party. My birthday party. There were streamers on the lawn, a catering van, and people, our friends, my co-workers, holding drinks and laughing. They were all waiting for the guest of honor to emerge. Maya opened the front door and her entire demeanor shifted. The cold, calculating strategist vanished, replaced by a grieving, courageous wife. She wiped a stray, fake tear from her eye. "Everyone, thank you for coming," she called out to the lawn. "As many of you know, Julian has been struggling lately. We were hoping today would be a celebration of his recovery, but things have taken a turn. He needs professional care." The crowd went silent. I saw my boss, Marcus, shaking his head in pity. I saw our friends whispering to each other, looking at me through the open door with a mixture of fear and I knew something was off. She had spent months seeding the ground. She'd told them I was forgetful. She'd told them I was obsessive. She had painted a picture of a man losing his mind so slowly that when the hammer finally dropped, they were already conditioned to believe it. Mark stepped out onto the porch behind her, putting a supportive hand on her shoulder. To the world, he was the hero neighbor stepping in to help a woman in crisis. To me, he was the man who had helped her hack my life. "I didn't do any of this," I shouted, trying to push past the men in suits. "She's lying. Check the bank accounts. Check the signatures." But the men grabbed my arms, and to the people on the lawn, my desperate shouting just looked like the aggressive outburst Maya had warned them about. I saw my boss turn away, unable to watch my shame. "It's okay, Julian," Mark said loudly enough for the neighbors to hear. "We've got you. You're going to be safe." They bundled me into a black SUV. As we pulled out of the driveway, I looked back. Maya was standing on the porch, holding a glass of champagne. She wasn't crying anymore. She caught my eye through the tinted glass and raised her glass in a silent toast. She thought she had won. She thought that by taking my phone, my keys, and my reputation, she had stripped me of my tools. What she forgot is that a forensic auditor doesn't need a computer to find a trail. He just needs a memory. Inside the SUV, I sat silently between the two guards. They thought I was defeated. They didn't notice that I was counting the turns, noting the VIN number of the vehicle, and memorizing the names on their ID badges. They were taking me to a private facility, a black site for the wealthy, where people could be tucked away until their assets were fully drained. But Maya made one fatal error in her restructuring. She used our joint business account to pay the deposit for the facility. And that account is linked to an old automated reporting script I wrote 5 years ago, a script that sends a PDF of every transaction over $5,000 to my estranged father's email address. My father and I haven't spoken in a decade. He's a retired IRS investigator who thinks I'm too soft for the family business. If he sees a $20,000 wire transfer to a psychiatric wellness group from an account he helped me set up, he's not going to call the police. He's going to go to war. As the SUV hit the highway, leaving the suburbs behind, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a hunter. Maya had given me exactly what she promised, a clean slate, and I was going to use it to write her ending. The wellness retreat was called Pine Haven. It looked like a 5-star ski resort in the Catskills, all cedar beams, floor-to-ceiling glass, and overpriced organic linens. But the doors didn't have handles on the inside, and the nurses had the build of NFL linebackers. "Mr. Vance, we're just here to help you decompress," the lead orderly said, as they escorted me to a room that smelled faintly of lavender and clinical despair. They took my belt, my shoes, and the burner phone they didn't know I had. Luckily, they only checked my pockets. They didn't check the lining of my coat, where I'd stitched a slim, encrypted USB drive 2 years ago, a dead man's switch for my firm's most sensitive data. For the first 48 hours, I played the part. I was the broken husband. I sat in the group therapy sessions. I listened to a doctor named Sterling tell me that my memories of Maya's betrayal were manifestations of acute paranoia brought on by career burnout. "Maya loves you, Julian," Dr. Sterling said, tapping a gold pen against a clipboard. "She's paying $5,000 a day to ensure you recover. Does that sound like a woman trying to erase you?" "It sounds like a woman buying a vacuum," I replied. "You don't pay for the air, you pay for the silence." Sterling just smiled and adjusted his glasses. He was on the payroll. Everyone here was. This place wasn't for healing. It was a high-end storage facility for inconvenient spouses and wealthy elderly parents whose children wanted their inheritance early. But Maya made a tactical error. She assumed that by taking my status, she took my mind. On the third night, I found my opening. The facility used a centralized tablet system for patient engagement, reading material, meditation apps, and meal requests. It was a closed loop, supposedly unhackable, but every closed loop has a knot. I waited until the 2 a.m. rounds were over. I used a sharpened plastic spoon to pop the casing on the wall-mounted charging port in the common room. Beneath the plastic was a standard RJ45 Ethernet jack. I didn't need a computer. I just needed a bridge. I spent the next 3 hours hardwiring the tablet's internal radio to bypass the facility's firewall. By 5 a.m., I was staring at the raw data of Pine Haven's financial backend. And that's when I saw it. Pine Haven wasn't just a clinic, it was a shell company, and the primary shareholder wasn't a medical group. It was a holding company called Apex Strategic Assets. The CEO of Apex? Mark, my helpful neighbor. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It was a massive, multi-layered racketeering scheme. Maya wasn't just leaving me for a lover. She was moving me into a facility owned by her partner in crime so they could use my treatment costs to launder the $84,000 they stole from our joint account. They weren't just spending my money. They were paying themselves to keep me prisoner. I felt a surge of adrenaline that cleared the fog of the sedatives they'd been slipping into my water. I began to dig deeper. I used the tablet to access the firm's remote server, the one Maya thought she'd blocked me from. She'd deleted my admin credentials, sure. Noanazabula Pro, the janitor. The janitor was a backdoor script I'd written years ago to track internal embezzlement. It didn't look for names. It looked for patterns. I triggered the script. Within minutes, the screen was flooded with red flags. Over the last 6 months, Maya hadn't just been gaslighting me. She had been bleeding her own law firm. She'd been diverting retainer fees from high-profile divorce cases into an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. She wasn't just replacing me with Mark. She was planning to disappear entirely, and I was her fall guy. If the FBI ever came knocking at the firm, the paper trail led directly to my unstable hands. Suddenly, the door to the common room hissed open. I barely had time to hide the tablet under a sofa cushion before a nurse walked in. It wasn't the usual night shift. It was a woman I hadn't seen before. She looked at the wall-mounted port, then at me. "Mr. Vance," she said, her voice a sharp contrast to the sugary tones of the other staff. "You're up late for someone who's supposed to be under heavy sedation." I prepared for the worst. I expected her to call security, to have me restrained, to end my game right there. Instead, she walked over to the sofa, reached under the cushion, and pulled out the tablet. She looked at the code running on the screen, the janitor script still pulsing with red lines of data. "Forensic accounting," she whispered, a small, genuine smile touching her lips. "I haven't seen a bypass like this since I worked for the SEC." I froze. "Who are you?" "My name is Elena," she said, tucking the tablet under her arm. "And like you, I'm an inconvenient person. I'm not a nurse, Julian. I'm a whistleblower. Maya's firm tried to bury 3 years ago. They couldn't kill me without a scandal, so they put me on the payroll here to keep me quiet." She leaned in, her eyes burning with a shared hatred. "You want to destroy her?" Elena asked. "Because I have the keys to the Cayman account, but I can't trigger the transfer from inside the firewall. I need an outside signature. Someone with the legal authority to claim the funds." "My father," I said. "He's an IRS investigator. He has the signature." "Then we have 2 hours before the morning shift," Elena said, handing me her own encrypted phone. "Call the old man. Tell him his son isn't crazy. Tell him his son is about to pull the biggest heist in the history of the IRS." I took the phone. My fingers didn't shake. Maya thought she had scripted my ending. She didn't realize I was about to rewrite the entire genre. The sunrise over the Catskills was cold, but for the first time in months I felt warm. Elena had done her part. She didn't just give me a phone, she gave me the blueprints to the fortress. My father's voice on the other end of the line had been gravelly and sharp. He didn't ask if I was okay, he didn't ask why I was in a mental health facility. He just said, "Julian, I saw the wire transfer 3 hours ago. I've already flagged the Apex holding group. I was waiting for you to call. Now give me the encryption keys for the Cayman accounts, and I'll have a federal warrant signed before your wife finishes her morning latte. That was the Vance way. We don't cry, we calculate. At 10 a.m., the gates of Pine Haven didn't just open, they were breached. 2 black Suburbans and a local sheriff's cruiser pulled into the circular driveway. Dr. Sterling tried to block the entrance, clutching his clipboard like a shield, but my father stepped out of the lead vehicle. He looked exactly like the IRS investigator he used to be, a shark in a tailored suit. "I'm here for my son," my father said, not even looking at Sterling. "And if you say one word about a medical evaluation, I'll start a tax audit on this facility that will last until your grandchildren are in retirement homes." I walked out of the front doors, fully dressed, with Elena by my side. I handed the sheriff the USB drive, the one containing the janitor logs and the proof of Mark's ownership of the clinic. "Julian," my father said, finally looking at me, "you look like hell. Let's go finish this." We didn't go to the police station. We went back to the suburbs. We went back to my house. The party was still technically going on. A few friends were lounging by the pool, and I could see Maya and Mark through the glass doors of the patio, laughing as they looked at a brochure for a villa in Tuscany. They thought the Julian problem had been solved. They thought I was sedated and signed away. I walked through the side gate. When Maya saw me, her glass of champagne slipped from her hand, shattering on the flagstone. "Julian," she gasped, her face turning a ghostly shade of grey. "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be in the Catskills?" I finished for her, stepping into the sunlight. "The treatment didn't take, Maya. Turns out I have a very resilient memory." Mark stood up, trying to puff out his chest. "You're trespassing, Jules. I have the papers. I own this property now." "Actually, Mark," my father said, stepping up behind me, followed by 2 federal agents, "you own a mountain of debt and a one-way ticket to a deposition. We've been tracking the money you moved through Apex. It's called structured money laundering. And since you used Julian's name to do it, it's also identity theft on a federal level." Maya's lawyer brain tried to kick in. "You have no proof of—" "I have the janitor logs, Maya," I interrupted. "I have the whistleblower from the clinic. And I have the recording of you telling me you optimized my life while I was sitting in our kitchen. Remember that Nest camera you thought you controlled? I had a secondary cloud backup running on a server you didn't even know existed. The silence that followed was deafening. The neighbors, the same ones who had clapped while I was dragged away, were now staring in horror. Henderson, my boss, looked like he wanted to crawl into the pool and disappear. "Maya, you spent 8 years trying to be the smartest person in the room," I said, walking closer until I could see the panic in her eyes. "But you forgot the first rule of forensic accounting. The numbers never lie. People do." The agents moved in. They didn't be gentle. They handcuffed Mark first, who immediately started shouting that it was all Maya's idea. Then they turned to my wife. As the cuffs clicked into place, she looked at me with a pure, unfiltered hatred. "You're nothing without me, Julian. You were just a boring auditor. I made our life a masterpiece." "No," I said, leaning in so only she could hear. "You made our life a fraud, and I just finished the audit." As they were led away to the waiting cars, I turned to the crowd of friends on my lawn. I walked over to the black fondant cake that was still sitting on the outdoor table. I picked up the little sugar sculpture of the man standing in the window, the one meant to be Mark. I dropped it on the ground and crushed it under my shoe. "The party's over," I told them. "Get off my property." That night, I didn't stay in a Motel 6. I stayed in my house. It felt empty, but it felt clean. My father sat in the kitchen with me drinking a scotch. "What now?" he asked. I looked at the burner phone Elena had given me. There was a message from her.